find something that is super, super interesting to you, that drives an intellectual curiosity that you can't put it down. You can't put a book down because you want to just keep reading and keep talking to people about something, whatever that might be. When you have that drive to learn, in a building a kind of a unique set of expertise in it, right, almost naturally.
Hey Adrian, thank you so much for being here on MCAS today. We really appreciate your time and you sharing about your experience in venture capital, entrepreneurship, and your early career in engineering.
Great, thank you for having me. I'm Adrian Fortino. I am a mechanical engineering undergrad, 2000, a long time ago, and then 2010 graduate. As you mentioned, I came out of my undergrad into a company that I interned with called Ricardo, which is an engineering consulting firm. Amazing experience there, traveling the world, living across the world as an automotive engineer for many years. Then during my MBA, quit Ricardo to go and join my very first startup, which didn't end well, but kind of closed down pretty quickly in the Great Recession. But then after that, got a chance to, got kind of the feel for entrepreneurship and said I wanted to, continue and commit to that. So started 3 software companies after that as a co-founder, and then ran those in various roles for a number of years. And then after a number of those operational years, went and ran a seed fund in Detroit called Invest Detroit Ventures for about a year and a half. And then almost 10 years ago, I joined Mercury to help run that fund and partnering with wonderful founders across the middle of the country.
That's wonderful. Glad to hear you have so many different experiences in your career. But as you mentioned earlier, you studied mechanical engineering at your undergrad here at Michigan, and then you started your career as a automotive engineer. And for most of us that are not really familiar with the field or areas, could you tell us more about the engineering industry at that time and what are your key learnings for your early career stage?
Sure, yeah. So when one graduated in 2000 as a mechanical engineer, you kind of felt like you only had one job, right? Or job opportunity to go into automotive, right or wrong. And that was certainly the way I felt. I had interned with a company that I went to work for a couple summers. A lot of comfort there, and it ended up being just a wonderful decision, just a fantastic decision for me to go there. As a automotive consulting engineer, I got the chance to work with a number of different car companies, Ford, GM, Chrysler, Nissan, and also some of the kind of diesel companies as well, like Detroit Diesel. So because I had an opportunity to kind of engage and work with all kinds of different companies, I got a great experience understanding how to have kind of manage stakeholders and manage and work with people that didn't report to me. And so I had this wonderful balance of doing really real engineering work. Like I was doing combustion development work for these engine systems, emissions, like a lot of chemistry, true mechanical physics development, physics work. And then I also had some business side because Ricardo's a small company. And so we kind of couldn't just be an engineer there. You had to be an engineer plus kind of a salesperson, plus project manager. And so those early skill sets, and also because it was such a small company, at the time, I don't think we had more than, maybe 75 people in Michigan, and had another maybe 1,000 or so in the UK, in Brighton, in the UK, another maybe 30 or so in Chicago. It's a pretty small company. And so they load you up. It's very much a sink or swim sort of environment there, which I loved, right? You just got a chance to go and take a bunch of responsibility and hopefully you're successful.
I totally agree with you that in smaller company, you kind of can take more responsibilities, and that's why a lot of people choose to join startups because they get into diverse roles. And then you just jump into the MBA at Ross, where you begin independent consulting and later into venture capital. So we're really curious what kind of activities you did in Ross and help you to get into the venture capital world.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I got to school, I certainly came here for the entrepreneurial curriculum and the venture capital curriculum. As an engineer, I had no real exposure to it, and I was very curious, and I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could. And I had a personal goal when I started business school, that I wanted to either start a company or join a startup before I graduated. Right, and that was a goal that I kind of was always sort of a North Star for me over the course of my time. And so, I was an intern with the Michigan Venture Capital Association during my time. I went to a number of different networking things through the Zellweger Institute, and really was able to build, and I took every entrepreneurial class, new venture creation, private equity, venture capital with Dr. Brophy, like all of them. I was there and just pulled as much as I could and tried to build as much network as I possibly could. We had great sort of practical lecturers there. I met some of now my guys that I still count as good friends at RPM Ventures that were lecturers there when I was a student. And so it's just a wonderful way for an engineer to go in and just get a ton of exposure. And something what I was looking for.
We also noticed that you did a lot of entrepreneurial projects during your MBA, including Shepherd Intelligence System and Sidecar. And how could you do that? Could you share with us?
It's a good question about all of those, and they weren't all in parallel, right? And so certainly the first one that we started was Shepherd Intelligence System, Shepherd IS. Is actually the start of it was really the Magic Bus app that you guys may still use, where some master's students were working on it, and they were thinking, hey, there might be a business here, possibly, and actually some of those people in that network that I just mentioned introduced me to them. We started to think about, hey, is there a company here? And so we licensed, some of the software that we didn't actually use out of the university, and we're a tech transfer licensed company, and went off and started what really was the first cloud-based fleet management system back in 2009. And I built it into a nice little company serving fleets in the Midwest and East Coast, and had a wonderful time building that company with a few partners and employees. And then over time, there might be something more here. And we were kind of thinking about raising money and didn't have a ton of success raising money, because I think the thought process was that the total addressable market for Shepherd. And so over time, we started to think about other things and talk to a lot of people and network, and ran into built some network with some folks in the West Coast. And then over time, and through lots of kind of gyrations, I ended up kind of, saying, hey, we're actually going to replace your car with your iPhone, right? And that was before Sidecar even existed. Raise some money on that and move the entire team to the Bay Area to go after a more consumer-facing opportunity. And initially, it was going to be an API for all public transportation and private transportation in an urban setting, which was really neat, kind of big swing opportunity. And then we kind of pretty quickly figured out that, hey, probably too big a swing for just a couple $1 million seed round. And in time, ended up focusing on just kind of a vertical that's instant ride share, which was Sidecar. And a great time building that with great partners and friends there in the Bay Area. And then there was also, been working on a project with actually one of my classmates in the MBA program. And, he was kind of running some experiments on loyalty and marketing programs for quick service restaurants in Ann Arbor. And ended up kind of finding some signal, I would say, on that. Ended up launching a company called the Flock Tag to be like the center point on a college campus for all your loyalty points. Really targeted those independently owned quick service restaurants, right? Where you buy 5, get 1 free, but the beauty is because it's all in one app, there's a lot of cross promotion across all of the different restaurants and businesses in there. It ended up being a really nice company and was operating across most of the Big Ten campuses. So I was a co-founder of all 3 companies, Shepherd, Sidecar, and Flock Tag, and just a wonderful time as an operator.
You're still pretty actively involved in those companies?
Oh, no, they've all kind of not really active anymore, and so I'm not active anymore.
Gotcha. Yeah, glad to hear that you have a really great journey of building those startups and working with great people. But we all know that building startups has a lot of up and downs. The ups can be really high and downs can be really low. And it comes with a lot of challenges. So wonder what are the biggest hurdle when you were establishing those businesses?
Yeah, I think some of the bigger hurdles early on were getting those first customers on board and having them believe that your vision of a product or a platform is going to be really impactful for them, especially if it's not fully built out yet, which is usually the case. And so we were lucky to have some early believers in that. And it just take, I think, a combination of both some good salesmanship, the feeling that the customers genuinely believe in you and in the company and in the opportunity, right? And so it's not easy to get those first few customers at all, able to knock down those doors, And then certainly in 2009 and 10 in particular, those are the times of the Great Recession, right? Yeah. When things were really tough. And so it was particularly difficult to fundraise during those years of 2009, 10. So that was very hard, but what it did is it really focused us on fundamentals. And then what are the fundamentals? Well, building something that customers really want and will pay for. And so those were really kind of good lessons, kind of fundamentally driving lessons for us as early founders.
We would also be interested to know more about the fund Mercury that you're working on. So you elaborate more on the investment strategies of Mercury and how does that align with your personal investment philosophies?
Great, thank you. Yeah, so we've been around for, about 18 years, maybe 19 years now. And it was started by two of my partners down in Texas. And it's developed and kind of sort of grown over time, both from a size perspective, but also from a thesis and a strategy perspective, right? And so now, we're a software-driven fund with primarily focusing on business-to-business, B2B software companies, most of which are software as a service, SaaS companies. But we also do some number of labor marketplaces, right? And so think of that as a labor marketplace tackling maybe construction or healthcare, or any number of different industries that have a big kind of difference between the labor demand, or delta between demand and supply, I should say. And so we are early stage, and so we are seed and Series A. By and large, that means that these are companies that are on the low side, high hundreds of thousands of dollars of highest revenue, grew to $1 million. On the high side, we'll invest in companies that are doing $5 to $6 million of annualized revenue, all with a heavy software, a value driver. And also we're middle America focused. And so we just don't, invest in companies from the West Coast, kind of stay away from the Northeast, and then really kind of focus on our main territory. We have offices in Houston, Austin, Chicago, and here in Michigan. Yeah. And that footprint really kind of shows where we're most active. We're also spending a lot more time in the Southeast in our current fund too. And then how does it kind of fit with my own personal view? Well, I'm a born and raised, right? I grew up in a very small town, Elma, Michigan, in the middle of Michigan, farm country, and have, with the exception of some time in the Bay Area and some time in the UK, lived here the vast majority of my life, and I really like it. This is an important place for me, and more extending that, into the Great Lakes in the middle of the country. And so we as a fund, me as a operationally focused venture capitalist, we really see great opportunities to partner with middle America founders. Those founders that we find, they are engaged, they want the help, they want the support, and they are really looking for true thought partners to help them scale their business. In other places, in the country, you can find maybe a little bit less of that thought partner interest. It's more kind of like, give me the money and leave me alone. And that's just not the kind of, sort of founder characteristic that fits as well for us. And so that, we really look for those founders that are, they might be first-time founders, and they're just looking to get a great operational partner.
Yeah, you touched a little bit about the differences between the West Coast and the Midwest. That's exactly my next question is. So we found it's really interesting looking back at your career. You spent a long time in the Midwest, and not only building startups here, but now on the other side of the table, you're investing in companies mostly in the Midwest. So we wanted to dive from your perspective. Why do you think those Midwest startups can stand out really well compared to those startups on the coast or even in the Silicon Valley? What are their competitive advantages that you really like?
Yeah. So look, great companies are built all over the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, great companies are built in the West Coast. Great companies are built in the Northeast, Southeast, Great Lakes, South. So there isn't any sort of mutual exclusivity by any stretch of like, oh, if you can do it here, you can't do it there. That doesn't exist. But what we see and what I see is I often see situations in the middle of the country where people are building companies to address a market need or a pain point that they viscerally understand because they were in it. I consider that to be kind of founder market fit. And so I get most excited about opportunities that have great founder market fit, right? As opposed to a situation where you might have a group of founders that are like, we don't have an experience in this industry, but we see an opportunity to go and solve it. And that might be great too, but I can just say from history and companies that we've worked with, when someone really has a unique insight into an industry, a vertical, whatever it might be, and can solve something for an ideal customer profile, they really understand that buyer persona. We just see that as a unique thing you see in the Midwest and in the middle of the country, I would say at a higher rate than you might see in other places.
Thank you for the last part. We really want to seek some advice for our young students because most of our audience is younger students. So the first question would be for those students who want to dive deep into one industry and gain expertise in one sector. Do you have any good advice for them?
Yeah, I would say that find something that you're really passionate about that is something that you don't need the job to devote time to, if that makes sense. What's an area that might be really growing fast and you're super curious about? Maybe it's Gen AI, maybe it's supply chain, maybe it's the electric vehicle scaling, maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's whatever it might be. Right. And so it's the way that we think about a lot of the investing that we do. You know, we very much use a prepared mind model to learn about certain theses and sectors or market trends. And I think from a founder perspective, or at least a potential founder perspective, you can do the same, right? And I wouldn't even pretend to sort of prescribe a certain sector because there's all kinds of different places that people could be excited about, whether it goes climate tech or whatever it might be. But find something that you're passionate about and learn as much as you can.
Yeah, I really like that. And we also know that you teach a course in Center of Entrepreneurship about venture capital. So can you give 3 pieces of advice for students who want to go to venture capital later?
And I'd say that for people that want to get into venture capital, there are a few things that are really important to have some success there. I'm biased, so you have to caveat that I think operational experience is really important. Right? I'm a former operator, served in a number of companies, been there as in a number of functions. I believe that is incredibly helpful and valuable to me as an investor. And this is the advice I got when I went to a friend, one of my lecturers back in 2007, and I said to him, "Hey, Tony, I want to be a venture capitalist. What do I do?" What did he say? He said, "Go start a company." Right? And that was the best advice that I could have gotten.
Yeah.
Also because it's really hard, especially if you're just out of school, to find one of those analyst jobs, right? Not impossible, but it's really hard. It's a lot more opportunity to be able to go in and either start a company or maybe join a startup at a very early stage and get that experience. So that's like number 1 for me, right? Number 2, it's back to the question that you asked, right? Is there some area, some trend, something in the world that you get really excited about? You build a lot of expertise. And that, again, that unique insight that you're building is something that's relevant to a certain subset of funds. That when they meet you, they're like, oh my gosh, she knows more than I do about that's very impactful for my fund manager. right? And so that's something that is, I think, really beneficial, and you said 3, right?
Yeah.
Those are the number 1 and 2 by a long shot. I guess number 3 is building network, leveraging the network of Michigan. The university, our school has an unparalleled network in entrepreneurship and in venture capital. And so, really leverage that as much as you can. In my class, I bring in 12 founders and investors to help my students go through the couple simulations that we do. That's an unparalleled network that those students get. And I don't think there are many classes like that on campus, nor probably in the country to offer that to students. And so leverage that, use that, build a great network while you're here.
I think 9 out of 10 guest speakers that we interviewed on this podcast were really successful in venture capital investors have the experience of working on the other side of the table. Making the decision of the investment is not just about money, it's about how you can help the company grow later, how you help them make the decisions. And if you have those similar operating experiences, that's going to really make you stand out. I think our last part for this episode were 3 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Great.
I can start. So the first is, what's your favorite business book?
Oh, wow. Great one. So I really like The Power Law, which is relatively new release, maybe a little bit of Vitae, right? So it's hard one, right? So I'm going to give you 3. I'm sorry. Power Law, I love that book. The old, favorite that I think is a foundational book for people, Venture Deals, which is a great one. And then my friend, Hani, wrote The Business of Venture Capital. And so that's also wonderful.
The second question is, what is one thing that always drives you up in the morning?
Oh, look, the best part of my job is to partner with founders and teams and help them navigate challenging situations. And so that opportunity to be able to tackle a problem with one of them and try to help them. One of the things that I say to founders before we ever invest is that my kind of relationship goal is that what hits the fan and things go bad, startups aren't perfect. And so my aspiration as a partner to you, said founder, is that I'm the first person you call when things go bad. You can call somebody else when things go good, that's fine. But when things are challenging and you need help and you need somebody, I hope I'm the first person you call, right? And that's something that I aspire to every founder that I partner with.
To close this, my last question is, name one person that you are really, really grateful in your life.
I would probably say, my wife, she is a teacher and had a pretty stable income and more importantly, benefits when I was kind of going off being a crazy founder and living in, the Bay Area and kind of going off while we had 2 young kids. It kind of afforded me the opportunity to go off and make some pretty crazy career decisions. When I left Ricardo to join my first startup, I took an 80% pay cut, right? And so I'm grateful that she, really afforded me and us the ability to take some really big risks, massive riscs. And also in a time, it was in 2008, so before things really got bad at the end of 2008. But yeah, I would say that my wife, I'm probably most grateful for. But there's a lot of other people out there.
So sweet. We're gonna invite her to listen to this. Well, thank you so much, Adrian,
Thank you.
joining us on this episode today. We really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate all the advice you gave.